The office clock hit midnight, its rhythmic ticking the only sound in the room. Amanda Carter stared at the desk. Schematics were stacked in uneven columns, chemical formulas blurring under the harsh fluorescent light. She traced a line on a diagram, then stopped. She had been tracing the same lines for years, watching colleagues hit the same invisible walls, year after decade. Her fingers tapped against the wood, a sharp, uneven rhythm. She pushed the papers aside, the friction of parchment against the desk surface sounding like sandpaper. She was smarter than this. She knew the math, the variables, the reactions. Yet, she was stuck. She leaned back, the chair springs groaning in the silence. She looked at the blank space between her current output and her potential. The realization hit with the weight of the silence itself. Intelligence was not the variable. It never had been. The math was perfect, but the process was hollow. She had spent 10 years solving the wrong problem, and the weight of that truth left her breathless. She looked at the papers again. They were not evidence of progress. They were evidence of a cycle that had to break. She reached for a worn book resting under a stack of journals. The spine was cracked, the edges softened by years of use. She flipped through the pages until her eyes locked onto a single sentence. Success is a habit. She read it twice, then a third time. The words did not offer a miracle, but they offered a map. She closed the book with a firm thud, the sound echoing off the office walls. That night, she stopped looking for the shortcut that did not exist. She grabbed a fresh pad of paper and a pen. She wrote 3 headers. The first was simple: reading. She set her alarm for 4 in the morning. When the light finally bled through the blinds the next day, she was already sitting at her desk. The city outside was silent, a vast, sleeping machine. She opened the book again, the pages cool under her fingertips. She read, not for speed, but for retention. For the first time in a decade, the frustration that had clouded her mind began to dissolve, replaced by the steady, rhythmic intake of new information. She was no longer waiting for a break. She was constructing one page at a time. Knowledge was the first pillar, but capital was the engine. Amanda knew that saving was a battle of willpower she was destined to lose if she left it to chance. She opened her banking portal while the house was still dark. She did not calculate how much she could afford to keep. She calculated the minimum she needed to survive. She set a hard rule. Every single paycheck was split the moment it touched her account. She watched the screen as the funds moved into a high-yield account before she could even consider buying a coffee or a new piece of tech. There was a brief, sharp impulse to cancel the transfer, a flicker of hesitation as she thought of the immediate comfort that money could buy. She stared at the button, her finger hovering over the mouse. She did not click cancel. She clicked confirm. The screen refreshed, showing the balance dropped to exactly what was required for her bills. The emotional noise of managing expenses vanished, replaced by the silent, steady growth of her savings. She closed the laptop. The money was gone to her, but it was secure for her future. She no longer felt the anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck because she was no longer living on the edge of her capacity. She was building a fortress, one automated transaction at a time. The final pillar was the most volatile, her own limitations. Amanda looked at her schedule and circled the 1 hour that defined her greatest fear: public speaking. She stood in the center of her office, the room cold and empty. She set a timer for 60 minutes. Her first attempt was a disaster. Her voice cracked, her palms grew slick, and she stumbled over the simplest technical explanations. She stopped, took a breath, and started again. The second attempt was no better. She felt the urge to sit down, to hide behind her desk and wait for the feeling of inadequacy to pass. She did not sit. She leaned into the discomfort. She recorded her voice, played it back, and listened to every stutter. She analyzed the cadence, the pauses, and the inflection. She forced her body to remain upright, her eyes fixed on a specific spot on the wall as if addressing a crowded hall. Hour after hour, she refined the delivery. She stripped away the filler words and the nervous habits. By the time the timer dinged, she was exhausted, but the fear had lost its sharp edge. It was no longer a mountain, it was a task. She had turned a profound vulnerability into a mechanical process, mastered through the sheer weight of repetition. Years bled into a decade. The initial rush of novelty had long since evaporated, leaving behind a cold, unyielding structure. Amanda woke before the sun, every single morning, regardless of the weather or the weight of her fatigue. The alarm clock was the first adversary of the day. It buzzed with mechanical indifference at 4 in the morning. She felt the heavy pull of the covers, the sharp temptation to trade discipline for 2 more hours of warmth. She stared at the ceiling, her body aching, her mind hunting for a loophole, a reason to hit snooze just once. She did not move. She did not negotiate. She swung her legs out of bed, her feet hitting the floor with a rhythmic thud. This was the grind. It was not a grand, cinematic triumph. It was the quiet, repetitive friction of a life built on absolute consistency. She walked to the desk, opened the book, and began. Reading, saving, refining, these were no longer choices she made. They were the tectonic plates of her identity, shifting slowly, grinding against the status quo until the landscape of her life was permanently altered. She was a machine of her own making, fueled by the refusal to break the chain. She did not look for shortcuts anymore. She simply did the work, day after day, until the decade was gone. The final day at the engineering firm arrived without fanfare. Amanda signed the resignation papers, the ink drying in the silence of the office. She walked out, leaving behind the schematics and the predictable paycheck that had anchored her for years. She sat in a rented office space, the air smelling of fresh paint and ozone. This was the leap. No safety net, no corporate hierarchy to hide behind. She opened her laptop and registered the business. Her hands moved across the keys with the precision of a decade of practice. She drafted her first proposal, the structure of her consulting firm crystallizing in the glow of the monitor. The silence of the new office was heavy, pressing against her ears. She felt the sudden, sharp reality of the risk. Every decision was now hers alone. If she failed, there was no one to blame but the architect. She did not hesitate. She picked up the phone, dialed the first prospective client, and spoke with the exact, measured cadence she had perfected in the dark. The engineer was gone. The entrepreneur was active. She spent the next 10 hours mapping out workflows, finalizing contracts, and setting the pace for a company that existed only because she had refused to stop. The preparation was over. The test had begun. The first week was a trickle. The second was a flood. Amanda watched her inbox swell, the requests for consultations piling up faster than she could process them. She did not panic. She did not abandon the systems she had spent 10 years honing. She treated every new client with the same mechanical precision she had applied to her morning reading. When a major industrial contract landed on her desk, requiring a turnaround in 48 hours, she did not pull an all-nighter or rush the analysis. She executed the workflow she had practiced in the quiet years. She delegated, she cross-referenced, and she delivered the proposal 3 hours ahead of the deadline. The firm grew, not by luck, but by the relentless application of her established habits. Her office expanded, taking over the suite next door. The sound of a single keyboard became the rhythmic hum of a dozen staff working in tandem. She walked the floor, observing the machinery of her own creation. Revenue graphs climbed with vertical intensity. Competitors who had once looked down on her engineering background now sought her out for guidance. She was no longer just filling a niche. She was setting the standard for the entire industry. The transition was complete. Her habits had built the foundation. And now, that foundation was supporting an empire. The studio lights were blinding. Amanda adjusted her seat, the metal chair cold against her back. The cameras focused on her. The interviewer leaned forward, eyes scanning his notes for the hidden mechanism behind her sudden rise to dominance. He gestured at the charts on the studio monitor, demanding the secret. He wanted a blueprint, a shortcut, or a tactical revelation that could be bottled and sold. Amanda watched him. She did not look at the cameras. She looked directly at the man across from her. She waited for the silence to stretch, for the studio air to grow heavy with the anticipation of a complex answer. She leaned forward, her hands resting flat on the table, and spoke. "I simply stopped negotiating with my good habits." The interviewer paused, his pen hovering over his notepad. He waited for her to add a caveat, to explain the strategy, to give him the technical data he expected. He stared at her, waiting. Amanda did not blink. She did not offer another word. The authority in her silence filled the room, cutting through the manufactured noise of the television set. She had stripped the mystery away, leaving only the raw, undeniable reality of her discipline. The reporter's thumb twitched against his tablet. He was searching for a follow-up, a way to pivot the conversation back to complex algorithms or market trends. He looked at his producer off camera, then back at Amanda, his brow furrowed in genuine disbelief. He wanted a magic formula. He wanted a secret she had hidden behind a locked door. Amanda watched his eyes dart across the set, still hunting for a complexity that did not exist. She sat perfectly still. In that silence, the truth settled into the room. She looked past the bright studio lights and saw the decade of early mornings she had spent alone. She saw the automated transfers that had built her capital while others were still dreaming of starting. It had never been about the money. The wealth was a side effect, a physical byproduct of the person she had carved out of the void. She had spent years refining her own responses to the world, turning discipline into a physical reflex. The reporter finally lowered his pen, the silence between them now absolute. He realized he was not looking at a lucky entrepreneur, but at someone who had engineered her own nature. Amanda held his gaze, her posture unchanged, her mind already moving past the studio and back to the quiet, consistent work that remained her true north. The studio doors swung shut, muffling the hum of the cameras. Amanda walked through the quiet corridor, her footsteps rhythmic and precise. She bypassed the staff waiting with congratulatory smiles and entered her office. The room was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight hitting the mahogany surface of her desk. She sat down. The chair felt familiar, a physical anchor to the years of work that had brought her here. She did not reach for her phone to check the headlines or the stock fluctuations. Instead, she reached for the worn book that had started it all. Her fingers traced the spine, feeling the texture of the paper. She opened the cover, the sound of turning pages sharp in the stillness. She was no longer just an engineer or a public figure. She was the architect of her own existence, and the design was never finished. She read the first paragraph, her focus narrowing until the rest of the world faded into the background. There were no shortcuts left to find, no secrets to guard. There was only the next page, the next hour of study, and the next deliberate choice. She leaned into the light of her lamp, picked up her pen, and began to write. The cycle continued, one small, consistent action at a time.